It was supposed to be the kind of night people remembered forever, the kind of birthday party that trended on every social feed in San Francisco, the kind that screamed privilege, wealth, and untouchable status, and honestly, I had been looking forward to it because even though my life was basically set thanks to Walker Corporation, I still liked the idea of being celebrated, of having everyone I knew gather in one place just to toast to me, James Walker, the heir to one of the biggest empires on the West Coast. But the second I walked into that penthouse ballroom I could already tell something was off, because people weren't looking at me the way they usually did, with envy or respect, they were whispering, glancing toward the massive screen above the bar, and I swear I heard someone laugh before quickly covering it with a cough, so when I followed their gaze, expecting maybe a slideshow of embarrassing childhood photos, what I saw instead hit me like a sledgehammer. It was a live stream from Malibu Beach, crystal clear, projected larger than life, and right in the middle of it was my fiancée, Emily Carter, wearing the silver dress I'd bought her for tonight, standing next to some skinny intern with a face too smug for his own good, Ryan Kim, and she was smiling, glowing even, holding a cake with candles while everyone around them cheered happy birthday to him, not me, him. Like the universe had decided to spit in my face on the one night that was supposed to be mine. For a second I just froze, couldn't even process it, because Emily wasn't just some girlfriend I'd picked up at a bar, she was the woman I'd been engaged to for years, the daughter of Robert Carter, a man whose entire company, Carter Group, had been surviving because Walker Corporation kept throwing them lifelines, and this was how she repaid me, by ditching me on my birthday to throw a party for some broke intern, live streaming the humiliation so every guest at my event could watch it play out like a damn reality show, and the comments on the side of the screen, people typing little heart emojis and, so cute, made it even worse, like everyone else was in on the joke except me. The old meth James that was supposed to exist in this world would have lost his mind, gone crazy jealous, begged Emily to explain, maybe even fought Ryan on the spot, and then spiraled deeper into that pathetic role the universe had scripted for him, but I wasn't him, not anymore, because the second I saw that live stream I felt something crack open in my head and memories that didn't belong to me came flooding in. Like I'd just woken up inside someone else's story, and I suddenly knew how all of this was supposed to end if I played along, Emily and Ryan stabbing me in the back, Carter Group climbing on the shoulders of Walker Corporation, my parents dying in a business accident, me ending up ruined and forgotten, a disposable villain in somebody else's happily ever after, and let me tell you, I wasn't about to play that part. So instead of flipping tables or storming out, I smiled, an actual smile, and raised my glass to the crowd, pretending like none of it bothered me, which only made the whispers louder because no one could figure out if I was drunk, delusional, or just dangerous, and honestly, maybe it was all three, but deep down I already knew what I was going to do. I was going to burn their script to ashes and write my own. And if Emily and Ryan wanted to play Romeo and Juliet, then fine, I'd be the villain. They underestimated, the kind who didn't go down but made sure everyone else did. I walked through the party like nothing had happened, shaking hands, accepting gifts, laughing at jokes I didn't hear, all the while replaying that live stream in my mind, memorizing the way Emily's eyes sparkled at Ryan, how she leaned into him like he was the only one who mattered, and the more I thought about it the less it hurt, because pain turned into fuel real quick when you realized it wasn't about losing someone. It was about realizing they were never yours to begin with, and the truth was Emily Carter had always been looking for a way out. I was just too blind or too arrogant to notice, but now that I saw it clearly I wasn't angry, I was free. Still, I wasn't going to let her or Ryan walk away clean, not after the way they tried to humiliate me in front of the entire city. No, I was going to take everything they valued and crush it in my hands, and the best part was I didn't even have to lift a finger tonight, because the power was already mine. Walker Corporation didn't just dominate tech and real estate, it practically owned San Francisco. From the banks to the construction companies to the media outlets, and Carter Group was nothing without us propping them up. So while Emily was busy singing birthday songs to her new little project, I was already thinking about how fast I could pull the rug out from under her father's company. I slipped out of my own party before midnight, ignoring the confused looks, slid into the back of my black SUV, and told my driver to head to the office, because who needed cake and champagne when you could have the satisfaction of planning an empire's downfall. And as the city lights blurred past the window I opened my phone, firing off messages to my board, to our legal team, to the bankers we practically owned. Simple instructions that would trigger a chain reaction Carter Group would never recover from, and the crazy thing was how easy it felt, like flipping a switch. One moment they were barely standing, the next they'd be drowning in lawsuits, margin calls, and cancelled contracts, and I didn't even have to raise my voice. By the time I got to the Walker Corp headquarters, the building glowing like a monument in the night, my smile hadn't faded, because the future was already rewriting itself, and the James Walker everyone thought they knew, the weak, jealous, desperate fiancé begging for scraps of love, was gone, replaced by someone who understood the game and wasn't afraid to play it dirty, and I knew this was just the beginning, the first step in a long, ruthless dance that would end with Emily, Ryan, and the entire Carter family on their knees. I didn't need their explanations, I didn't need closure, what I needed was results, and results were exactly what I was going to get, because tomorrow morning, while Emily Carter still believed I'd forgive her like always, while Robert Carter thought he could smooth things over with a few phone calls, and while Ryan Kim basked in the glow of stolen attention, the world would shift beneath their feet, and none of them would see it coming, not until it was too late. And that's the thing about betrayal: people think it destroys you, but for me it was the opposite. It set me free, it lit a fire I didn't even know I had, and as I stood in my office overlooking the city, my city, I made a silent promise to myself: this wasn't about heartbreak, it wasn't about jealousy, it was about power, and by the time I was finished, they would all understand that betraying James Walker was the last mistake they'd ever make. The thing about power is that people only notice it when you use it, but true control is knowing you can flip a switch and change the lives of everyone around you without raising your voice, and that was exactly what I was doing as the city slept, pulling levers and signing documents that would turn Carter Group's comfortable little bubble into a nightmare. Because while Emily Carter thought I was licking my wounds and Ryan Kim was probably still riding the high of having a rich man's fiancée sing him happy birthday on the beach, I was making calls that would cut off every lifeline her father's company had left, starting with the banks, because Walker Corporation wasn't just a tech giant, we were deeply embedded in finance, and one message from me had their credit line frozen before dawn: no extensions, no renegotiations, just a polite notification that repayment was due immediately. And I could almost picture Robert Carter's face when his CFO showed up in his office with that letter: the disbelief, the panic, the dawning realization that his entire empire had been balanced on my good graces this whole time. By the time the sun came up, the dominoes were already falling, suppliers canceling shipments, contractors pulling out of deals, and the stock dipping before the market even opened, because rumors spread fast in this city and people smelled blood in the water. But I didn't lose sleep over it. In fact, I felt more awake than ever, like this was what I'd been born for. Not playing the role of lovesick heir chasing after a woman who never respected me, but taking control, becoming the villain in their story if that's what it took, because villains don't beg, villains don't wait around to be betrayed twice, villains act, and the more I leaned into that role the more natural it felt, like I'd been pretending my whole life and finally decided to stop apologizing for who I really was. Robert Carter called me before breakfast, his number flashing on my phone while I sat in the Walker Corp executive dining room sipping black coffee, and I let it ring 3 times before answering just to make him sweat, then pressed the phone to my ear and listened to him stumble through excuses, apologies, promises that Emily didn't mean it, that kids made mistakes, that Carter Group and Walker Corp were stronger together. And I almost laughed because he still didn't get it. He thought this was about his daughter ditching me at a party, like I was some insecure kid throwing a tantrum, when really this was about respect, about the Carter family forgetting their place. So I let him ramble until he ran out of breath, then I told him in the calmest voice I could manage that the contracts between Walker Corp and Carter Group were terminated effective immediately, that our lawyers would be in touch, and that he should probably start preparing for audits. And the silence on the other end was delicious, like I could hear him clutching at his chest. "James, wait, you don't understand," he finally blurted out, but I cut him off, told him I understood perfectly, and ended the call, leaving him to choke on the reality that without Walker Corp, Carter Group was nothing but an over-leveraged shell waiting to collapse, and the satisfaction I felt in that moment was sharper than any heartbreak Emily could have given me, because now the game wasn't about winning her back, it was about watching them all lose everything they thought they could steal from me. Of course, Emily tried her own approach later that morning, texting me like nothing had happened, little messages with hearts and apologies, asking if I wanted to meet for brunch, as if she could bat her eyelashes and make me forget she'd humiliated me in front of half the city, and I didn't reply, because silence is louder than any insult, and the more she waited the more desperate she'd get, but I knew her type. She wasn't worried about me as a man, she was worried about me as an asset, and once she realized I wasn't coming back, she'd cling even harder to Ryan Kim, thinking she could rebuild her future through him, which was hilarious because Ryan didn't have the resources, the connections, or the brains to keep Carter Group afloat, and sooner or later she'd find out that sleeping with the intern doesn't turn him into a king. I spent the rest of the day orchestrating their downfall, meeting with my board to redistribute Carter contracts to our subsidiaries, calling up government contacts to tip them off about certain irregularities in Carter Group's accounting books, irregularities I'd overlooked for years out of convenience but now would shine a spotlight on, and the beauty of it was that none of it could be traced back to personal vendetta. On paper it all looked like business, like Walker Corp was simply protecting itself from a failing partner, but deep down I knew it was war, and every move I made was a strike against the people who thought they could humiliate me without consequence. By the time the markets closed, Carter Group stock had dropped 12%, a figure that would have been worse if trading hadn't been halted, and my inbox was filled with analysts calling me a genius for cutting ties when I did, as if I had some sixth sense about where the industry was heading, and I let them believe it, let the press spin stories about my foresight and bold leadership, because the more they praised me the harder it would be for anyone to paint me as petty or vengeful. And that was the sweet irony. I could destroy the Carters in broad daylight and everyone else would clap. That night I stood by the window of my penthouse looking out over San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge glowing in the distance, and thought about how fast things had changed, how one live stream had flipped the script of my entire life, and instead of feeling bitter I felt alive, like I'd finally broken free of a cage I hadn't even known I was in, and I knew this was just the beginning, because taking down Carter Group was step one. Exposing Ryan Kim for the fraud he was would be step 2, and somewhere along the way Emily would realize she hadn't traded up, she'd traded down, and by the time she understood it, I'd be so far ahead she wouldn't even be able to see me anymore. And maybe that's cruel, maybe that makes me the villain in someone else's love story, but I don't care, because love stories are boring, predictable, full of sacrifices that make no sense, and I'm done being anyone's stepping stone. From now on this is my story, and if I have to play the bad guy to write it the way I want, then so be it. I'll be the kind of bad guy who wins, the kind who doesn't apologize for being smarter, stronger, and more ruthless than the people who try to take advantage of him. As midnight rolled around and the city lights flickered like stars below me, I raised a glass of whiskey to my reflection and whispered to myself, "Happy birthday, James Walker," because it felt like I'd been reborn. No longer the weak fiancé in a rigged script but the author of a new one, and tomorrow the Carters would feel the weight of that truth even heavier, because when the audits hit, when the media smelled blood, when Ryan Kim realized he was nothing but a pawn in a game he couldn't win, the real fun would begin, and I couldn't wait to watch it all burn. The funny thing about empires is that they never fall with a single blow, they collapse piece by piece, slowly at first, then all at once, and Carter Group was no exception, because the morning after I cut the cord the cracks already showed, the kind of cracks you couldn't tape over no matter how much spin you put on it, and while I was enjoying breakfast in the penthouse with the kind of calm only a man in control can have, Robert Carter was probably drowning in phone calls from panicked executives, suppliers demanding payment, and banks suddenly remembering just how much debt his company carried, and I didn't even need to be there to know the chaos, because the reports that landed on my desk painted the picture vividly. Carter construction projects halted because no one wanted to deliver materials without guaranteed funds, their stock still frozen from yesterday's plunge, employees whispering about layoffs, and most importantly, their rivals circling like sharks now that Walker Corp had pulled its protection away, and the best part was how quickly the city turned, because San Francisco doesn't wait for the weak to recover, it feeds on them, and Carter Group had officially become prey. By noon I got another call from Robert, his voice tight like he hadn't slept, begging this time instead of bargaining, telling me he'd do anything, that we could renegotiate, that Emily was young and foolish, that Ryan Kim was just a distraction, but I didn't give him the courtesy of a real conversation. I told him the contracts were already reassigned and Walker Corp didn't backtrack once a decision was made, then hung up, leaving him to stew in desperation, because I wanted him to feel it. The weight of losing something he never truly earned, and maybe a younger version of me would have hesitated, maybe I'd have thought about mercy, but not anymore, not after what they tried to do to me, and as far as I was concerned, Carter Group had written its own death sentence the second Emily decided to humiliate me in public. Emily herself wasn't handling it any better, because while her father tried calling me, she tried calling everyone else, my assistant, my friends, even my mother, like she could guilt-trip her way back into the circle, but none of those numbers worked in her favor because I'd already warned them, and from the way my phone lit up with her texts, alternating between sweet apologies and angry accusations, I could tell she was spiraling, unable to comprehend that I wasn't playing the same script as before, because the James Walker she remembered would have forgiven her by now, would have shown up with flowers and promises, but that James was dead, and the one standing in his place didn't answer to her anymore. Still, the funniest part of the whole mess was how quickly she turned to Ryan, and I knew it because the gossip mill in this city never sleeps, especially when it comes to people like me, so when word got out that Emily Carter had been seen clinging to Ryan Kim outside some cheap cafe in Oakland, trying to look unbothered while photographers snapped pictures, I almost spit out my drink laughing, because it was pathetic, like watching a socialite trade in a Ferrari for a bus pass and pretending it was an upgrade, and the irony was delicious because she thought Ryan was her safety net, her rebound, her hero, but all he was to me was leverage, a pawn who thought he'd stumbled into a throne without realizing it was a guillotine. Meanwhile Carter Group was sinking faster, the media finally catching the scent of blood, headlines speculating about bankruptcy, investigative journalists digging into their financials, regulators suddenly interested in things they'd ignored for years, and every time I saw another headline pop up, I couldn't help but smile, because I didn't even have to lift another finger, momentum had already taken over, and the Carters were learning the hard way that once you lose Walker Corp's protection, you don't just lose contracts, you lose credibility, and credibility is everything in this city. But the real satisfaction came that evening when I got a report from one of my people inside their offices, telling me that Robert had exploded in front of his board, screaming at Emily for starting this mess, calling Ryan a parasite and swearing he'd fix it, though everyone in the room could tell he didn't believe it himself, and that image stuck with me. The once proud patriarch of a family that thought they could stand on my shoulders now reduced to begging and blaming, and it reminded me of a truth I'd almost forgotten: respect isn't given, it's taken, and I was taking back everything they'd stolen from me piece by piece. Of course, I wasn't naive, I knew this was only the opening act, because Emily wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly, she was stubborn, entitled, and delusional enough to believe that she could rebuild her world on Ryan's back, and that meant she wasn't done making moves, which was fine by me, because the deeper she tangled herself with him, the easier it would be to crush them both at once. And I had all the time in the world to watch it happen. That night, standing on my balcony with the city spread out like a map beneath me, I thought about how satisfying it was to finally step into the role of the villain, because people spend their lives running from that label, desperate to be seen as good, as kind, as forgiving, but the truth is the villain is the one with the freedom, the power to decide, and while Emily and Ryan played house in their little bubble of denial, I was out here reshaping the city with a few words, and I knew exactly where this story was headed, because Carter Group's fall wasn't the end, it was just the beginning, the appetizer before the main course, and once I turned my full attention on Ryan Kim, he wouldn't even know what hit him. So when my phone buzzed with another message from Emily, this time a long rant about how I was overreacting, how I'd regret losing her, how Ryan cared about her in a way I never did, I didn't get angry, I just smiled, because the more she clung to that narrative, the harder she'd crash when it shattered, and the irony was that she still thought this was about her, when really it was about me, about taking control of my story, about rewriting the ending they'd tried to hand me, and by the time she figured that out, it would already be too late. The next chapter of this game was coming, and it wasn't about contracts or stock prices anymore, it was about exposing who Ryan Kim really was, pulling back the curtain on the poor boy-turned-lover who thought he could outplay me, and when that truth hit the Carters, when Emily finally saw the kind of man she'd traded me for, the humiliation she'd handed me would look like a joke compared to what was coming for her. Because I wasn't just ending Carter Group, I was ending the illusion that anyone could betray James Walker and come out on top. When the news about Walker Corporation cutting ties with Carter Group hit the market, the reaction was immediate and brutal. Just like I had predicted, the stock price plummeted, investors pulled out, creditors demanded repayments, and the once smug Robert Carter was suddenly scrambling like a rat in a sinking ship. The same man who used to toast to family bonds with me at gala dinners was now standing outside my office lobby for hours, hoping I'd give him 5 minutes of my time. But why? Why would I throw him a lifeline when I had already seen the future in that twisted original storyline where he and his precious daughter watched me lose everything? Not this time, not again. Now the tables had turned and Carter Group was nothing more than collateral damage on my road to rewriting my fate. Still, I wasn't naive enough to think that Robert Carter and Emily Carter would just roll over and accept their downfall. Desperation makes people reckless, and desperate they were. Every day my assistant would bring me updates: Carter Group trying to secure loans, begging old partners to stick around, even trying to smear me anonymously online. Except in this city my influence was unmatched, my name alone could destroy or create fortunes overnight, and no one wanted to risk siding with a sinking ship. Watching their frantic moves was like watching a poorly scripted drama where the villain doesn't realize the credits have already rolled, and yet, deep inside, I couldn't ignore the strange cocktail of emotions swirling in me. Yes, I wanted revenge, yes, I wanted them ruined, but there was also that sharp sting of betrayal that never seemed to dull. Emily Carter had been my fiancée, the woman I once thought I'd build a future with. I had loved her with everything I had, and she had thrown it all away for Ryan Kim, a broke intern who couldn't even afford a proper suit. And for what? For some fantasy about true love, about struggle and passion. The irony was almost laughable. Emily claimed she didn't care about wealth, that she wanted something real, and yet she never hesitated to enjoy the luxuries my family provided, the penthouse parties, the designer clothes, the cars, all of it. She wanted the best of both worlds, and she thought I'd just stand there and watch as she humiliated me. But the thing is, I wasn't the same James Walker anymore. I remembered everything. I remembered how in the original storyline I was blind, arrogant, and reckless, how I handed her everything and ended up losing it all. Now I was awake, and my revenge wasn't just about her, it was about reclaiming my dignity, my life, and making sure that no one could ever toy with me again. Carter Group's downfall was only the beginning. I had already started pulling strings in the shadows. Ryan Kim's name was still under the radar, but not for long. I wasn't going to just let him walk free while I dismantled the Carters. No, his time was coming too. The funny thing about guys like Ryan is that they think they're untouchable because they hide behind some fake image of innocence, a hardworking intern, a poor boy chasing dreams. But people forget that the higher you climb on a borrowed ladder, the harder you fall when someone kicks it away. I was that someone. I knew exactly how to bide my time, and while Emily was busy playing house with him, I was gathering every piece of dirt I could find, every weakness, every secret, every past mistake, because when I struck, I wanted it to be devastating, not just financially but socially. I wanted to strip away that mask and show the world what kind of man he really was. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the storm brewing inside the Carter household. Robert Carter was cracking under the pressure, employees were resigning en masse, suppliers were cutting ties, their offices were practically ghost towns, and Emily, sweet Emily, still seemed to think I'd eventually forgive her. Her arrogance was almost impressive. She had the nerve to show up outside Walker Tower one afternoon, dressed like she still belonged in my world, her hair styled, her heels clicking on the marble floor as if nothing had changed. She tried to talk to me, tried to smile like the past hadn't been burned to ashes, but I walked past her without a word, and the look on her face, that flicker of disbelief turning into anger, it was priceless. For the first time, she was beginning to realize that James Walker wasn't the man she used to know. I wasn't a backup plan, I wasn't a safety net, and I sure as hell wasn't going to give her another chance to stab me in the back. Still, the story wasn't over. Carter Group was circling the drain, but they hadn't drowned yet, and Ryan Kim was still comfortably hiding in the background, enjoying the show. The real climax hadn't even begun, because the moment I turned my full attention to Ryan and his family, that's when the real chaos would erupt. And trust me, I was already sharpening the knife. The collapse of Carter Group wasn't just a business failure, it was a slow-motion car crash that everyone in San Francisco's upper circle couldn't stop watching. the same people who once praised Robert Carter for his vision and Emily Carter for her poise, now whispered behind their backs, waiting for the final implosion, and through it all, Emily clung to Ryan Kim as if he was some kind of savior. The irony of her leaving meth man who held her family's survival in the palm of his hand for an intern barely making minimum wage was too rich to ignore. I heard through my network that she had moved into Ryan's tiny rented apartment downtown, trading her designer handbags and first-class vacations for thrift store furniture and late-night ramen noodles. The girl who once demanded champagne at every meal was now bragging about how romantic it was to cook instant noodles together, and I couldn't help but laugh. Love can be blinding, sure, but Emily's delusion was on another level. She honestly believed that Ryan Kim was her knight in shining armor, that their struggle made their relationship pure and noble. Except I knew the truth. I knew Ryan wasn't the simple, kind-hearted underdog he pretended to be. Behind that soft smile and pitiful background, there was ambition sharp enough to cut glass. He saw Emily as his golden ticket, his way into circles he could never enter alone. And while she thought she had chosen love over wealth, he was already calculating how to leverage her name, her connections, her desperation. It was a performance, and Emily was the perfect audience. Meanwhile, Ryan's mother Linda Kim was basking in her son's newfound success. The woman was unbearable even before, but now with Emily clinging to Ryan, she acted like her family had finally arrived, bragging to neighbors about her future daughter-in-law, spreading rumors that Ryan had been chosen by fate to outshine the Walkers. Every word that came out of her mouth was another reason for me to dig deeper into their lives. So I did. I started tracing their finances, their history, the skeletons they tried to bury, and what I found didn't surprise me: unpaid debts, shady favors, family disputes swept under the rug. They weren't just poor, they were messy, dysfunctional, and greedy, and that gave me plenty of leverage for later. But I wasn't rushing it. No, timing was everything. While Emily and Ryan played house, I wanted them to feel comfortable. I wanted them to believe they had won, that I was out of the picture, because nothing hurts more than being ripped from a dream just as you start to believe it's real. I remember seeing a paparazzi photo of them together at a small cafe, Emily leaning against Ryan's shoulder with that same dreamy look she used to give me. It didn't sting anymore, not the way it once did. Instead, I felt a strange sense of detachment. Like I was watching characters in a play that I already knew the ending of. The betrayal no longer burned at it. Fueled me. I had bigger plans, and they had no idea the storm was coming. Still, the city wasn't blind. People talked, people compared. Some pitted Emily, others mocked her, calling her a fallen princess chasing a fairy tale. But what really struck me was how Ryan basked in it. He loved the attention, loved the whispers. He played the humble card in public, acting embarrassed, but behind closed doors he was feeding off it, his confidence growing with each headline. And Emily, blinded by infatuation, mistook it for charm. The cycle was almost pathetic, but it was also perfect. The more arrogant they grew, the harder the fall would be, and fall they would, because I was done just dismantling Carter Group. That was only round one. Round two was personal, and it involved peeling away Ryan's carefully constructed mask layer by layer until Emily saw the truth for herself. By then it would be too late. Too late to save her family, too late to save her pride, and definitely too late to crawl back to me. And yet, part of me wanted her to see it all crumble, to realize just how wrong she had been. Not because I wanted her back, no, that door was closed, but because I wanted her to choke on the consequences of her choices. Still, patience was key, so I let the show go on. I let them parade their love in public, let them believe I was just another bitter ex. Meanwhile my network fed me every detail, every argument they had behind closed doors, every desperate attempt by Robert Carter to win back investors, every boast Linda Kim made at her neighborhood gatherings. All of it was ammunition, all of it would be useful, and when the time was right, I'd use it to deliver the kind of blow that would make the entire city watch in stunned silence. Part 3 had been about breaking Carter Group, but Part 4 was about setting the stage, about letting Emily and Ryan dig their own graves while I sharpened the shovel. And trust me, by the time Part 5 began, the Kim family would regret ever stepping into my world. By the time Carter Group was gasping for air, my focus had already shifted. Robert Carter was a dead man walking in the business world, and Emily was busy clinging to her fairy tale with Ryan Kim, which meant it was time to dig my claws into the Kim family. the so-called underdog clan that thought they had finally made it because Emily Carter was dumb enough to fall for Ryan's act. People saw him as the poor boy who won the heart of a wealthy heiress, but I knew better. I knew his humility was an act, his modest smiles carefully calculated, and behind him was Linda Kim, the kind of woman who'd sell her soul if it meant moving one rung higher on the social ladder. She was already flaunting Emily's name in every conversation, telling anyone who would listen that her son was destined to surpass me, that the Walkers were on their way out. Hearing those words only made me smirk, because she had no clue how close they were to getting buried. The first step was information, and thanks to the network I'd built since my rebirth, I had more than enough. Ryan's college record was full of disciplinary warnings, cheating scandals hushed up by professors who pitted his difficult background. Linda's financial records showed a trail of unpaid debts, pawn shop transactions, and even a small-time loan shark who still wanted her head on a platter. I didn't just want to destroy their reputation. I wanted to expose the foundation of lies they were standing on, so I started planting seeds. Quiet rumors at first, whispers about Ryan's past surfacing in the very circles Emily used to shine in. At the same time I made sure investors heard about Linda's unpaid debts and her habit of borrowing money she never paid back. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots. After all, San Francisco's elite thrive on gossip, and once you put blood in the water, the sharks do the rest. Meanwhile I stayed in the shadows, letting the story build, because I wanted Emily to be blindsided. I wanted her to defend Ryan in public while privately doubting him, and the best way to make that happen was to give her glimpses of the truth she couldn't ignore. So I arranged for her to overhear a conversation between Ryan and a contact of mine posing as an old friend. Ryan was bragging about how marrying Emily would give him leverage over the Walkers, how her family name was just a stepping stone, and the look on Emily's face when she caught a fragment of it was priceless. Confusion, denial, anger, all swirling together, but she shoved it down, convincing herself it was a misunderstanding, because love makes people stupid, and I was counting on that. The more she ignored the cracks, the harder it would hit when the dam finally broke. Still, I wasn't finished. I wanted public humiliation, something no one could spin, so I orchestrated a leak. A carefully timed drop of Ryan's academic scandals paired with Linda's debt history. Tabloids ran with it, financial blogs picked it up, and suddenly the golden boy and his loudmouth mother were headlines for all the wrong reasons. Emily tried to shield Ryan, going on social media about how the past doesn't define the present, but the damage was already done. Her defense only made her look more pathetic, like a princess defending a fraud, and Ryan, instead of stepping up, lashed out, blaming everyone else, cursing at reporters, fighting with neighbors who dared question him. The mask was slipping, and the whole city was watching. I knew this was just the prelude though, because the real show would be Carter Group's final implosion paired with the Kim family's disgrace, hitting them both at once like a double strike, one to shatter their pride and the other to salt the wound. I had already lined up my moves, from creditors ready to drag Carter Group through court to insiders willing to testify about Linda's unpaid loans. Everything was falling into place, and as much as I wanted to savor it, I knew I couldn't drag it out forever. Revenge isn't just about patience, it's about impact, and the impact would come when I pulled the trigger at the right moment. Still, in the quiet of my penthouse at night, staring out over the city lights, I couldn't help but reflect. This wasn't just about Emily or Ryan or Robert Carter, it was about me refusing to be the fool again, about me reclaiming control of the story. And even though I felt the satisfaction of every victory, there was still a part of me that wondered how far I'd go, how much darker I could get before I became the villain again. But maybe that was the irony, maybe being the villain was the only way to survive in this twisted world. Either way, the stage was set. Carter Group was about to collapse completely, the Kim family's secrets were spilling everywhere, and Emily was standing right in the middle, clinging to the man who was dragging her down with him. She had chosen her path, and now she would live with it. Part 6 would be the grand finale. The night when everything I had orchestrated finally converged, the night when Emily Carter, Ryan Kim, and the entire Carter Group would face the storm I had been building from the moment I woke up with my second chance, and trust me, no one was getting out unscathed. The night it all came crashing down felt almost cinematic, like I was watching the final act of a play I had written myself. Carter Group's headquarters was surrounded by reporters, creditors, and furious employees demanding unpaid salaries. Robert Carter had tried every trick in the book: fake partnerships, forged documents, last minute pleas, but nothing could stop the avalanche once I pulled the last pin. Walker Corporation announced a new partnership with Carter Group's biggest rival, and within hours, every remaining investor jumped ship, their stock free fell into oblivion, lawsuits piled up like a mountain, and Robert was left standing in front of cameras with sweat pouring down his face, stammering excuses that no one believed. His empire wasn't just collapsing, it was disintegrating in real time. And then came the Kim family, the second half of my symphony. The tabloids had already been feasting on Ryan's scandals and Linda's debt, but I wasn't satisfied with whispers. I wanted fireworks, so I arranged for a video to surface, Ryan in a drunken state bragging about how he was using Emily as a pawn, mocking her behind her back, calling her a spoiled idiot who traded a king for a beggar. The clip hit social media like a bomb, spreading across every platform within minutes. People who once envied Emily's romantic courage were now laughing at her, calling her naive, stupid, pathetic. Ryan tried to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable: his voice, his face, his words. And Emily couldn't run from it this time. I wasn't there to see her reaction in person, but I heard she locked herself in her apartment for 2 days, crying, screaming, throwing things. Reality had finally punched through the walls of her fantasy. The man she betrayed me for had humiliated her in the cruelest way possible, and the whole city was watching. Linda Kim didn't fare any better. Debt collectors circled her like vultures, neighbors who once tolerated her arrogance now spit at her feet, and the so-called bright future of the Kim family burned to ash in a matter of days. It was everything I had planned, everything I had waited for, yet standing at the top of Walker Tower watching the chaos unfold below, I couldn't help but feel an odd sense of emptiness mixed with triumph. Revenge is sweet, yes, but it doesn't fill the void, it doesn't erase the scars, it only proves that you can't let betrayal go unanswered. I thought about Emily then, about the look she gave me outside my office weeks ago, the disbelief, the anger, the pride. Now all of that was gone, replaced by shame and regret, and though part of me once craved to see her crawling back, when the chance finally came, I felt nothing. Because I had outgrown her, outgrown the version of me that once loved her blindly. She had made her choice, and I had made mine, and we were never going back. The city now whispered a new story. Not about James Walker the arrogant villain, but James Walker the untouchable, the man who destroyed 2 families with nothing but strategy and patience. Some admired me, some feared me, some hated me, but none could deny my name carried weight heavier than ever before. And as I stood there in silence, I realized something else. The future was mine to shape now, free from the chains of that old storyline, no longer a character doomed to fall. I was the author, the one pulling the strings, the villain, the hero, whatever I chose to be. Emily Carter and Ryan Kim would fade into the footnotes of history, their love story exposed as nothing more than a cruel joke, and Robert Carter would spend the rest of his life drowning in lawsuits and debts. As for me, I wasn't done. This was only chapter 1 of a much bigger book, because once you taste power like this, once you learn how to bend fate itself, there's no turning back. Maybe I was the villain, maybe I was the monster, but in a world where loyalty was fragile and love was a weapon, maybe that was the only way to survive. So I raised my glass to the skyline, to the empire I had reclaimed, to the enemies I had crushed, and to the countless stories still waiting to be rewritten under my hand. And in that moment I knew one thing with absolute certainty: James Walker was no longer anyone's fool, and no one would ever dare to write my ending for me again.